over yonder so I can take a look around at what you've seen. I can see from where I am you're on an adventure in a place you can't describe. Some things can't be captured in words. So show me colors, colors I need. Pictures this time. Show me food and sights and sounds. I wanna know what you find.
Alright, what's up mga kamat learner? Isang magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Panibagong araw na naman at ngayon ay magdi-discuss na naman tayo tungkol sa isang module. Pero for this day, we're going to discuss the modules for the grade 8 students. Alright, so for this day, we will be discussing the 5th module, and that is entitled Determining the Inverse, Converse, and Contrapositive of an if and then statement. So sa lesson na ito, my dear math learners, wala masyado tayong magiging solving. Instead, we will be discussing logic, or ibig sabihin, gagamitin natin ang ating mga konting analysis lang para mas gumaling tayo sa pagbibigay ng mga justifications and explanations about this topic. Alright. Okay, so bago tayo mag-start, if ever bago ka pa sa ating channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell para laging updated ka sa ating mga susunod na discussions. As well as, if ever, kung gusto mo marami pang ma-reach out ang ating channel sa mga iba't ibang students dito sa Philippines as well as in the world, pakiclick na lang din ng like button. Alright, okay. Let us start, my dear math learners. So, ano nga ba itong module 5 ng mga grade 8 students for the quarter 2? Okay, so for the first page, you will have the cover page with the title on it. And on the second page, you will be shown with the people behind kung sino ang gumawa ng module na ito. Alright, so disclaimer, hindi ito sa akin. Ang mga modules na dinediscuss natin sa channel na ito ay gawa ng mga people from the Department of Education Philippines. At nandito lang ako para tumulong sa inyo mga math learners para mas ma-learn ninyo or mas matutunan ninyo and ma-understand ninyo ng mas mabuti ang mga topics sa inyong mga modules. Alright, number 3 is the title page. This is about determining the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of an if and then statement. So, ano nga ba itong inverse, converse, contrapositive? Ano ba pagkakaiba nila? So, remember, last week or last discussion about the grade 8, Module 4, we talk about the if and then statement. So, yung mga hypothesis, conclusion. So, ngayon, meron pang mga ano yan siya, different types. Okay, so ito na yun sila. Next, the next page of that is the introductory message for the facilitator. Those are your teachers. And for the learners at kayo yun, my dear math learners. Alright. Then after that, on the 5th page, we will have the objectives of the module. Okay, so ano nga bang objective sa module na ito? So first, we are going to determine the inverse, converse, and the contrapositive of an if and then statement. And the second is to illustrate the equivalences of A, the statement and its contrapositive, and B, the converse and inverse of a statement. Okay, so after you know about the objectives, you will be given series of questions, multiple choice lang, at ito yung tinatawag natin na let us try activity. Now, my dear math learners, no pressure because this is just a pre-test. So, kung ano lang yung kaya nyong sagutin, so, yun lang dun sasagutin ninyo. Alright. So, kung ano lang yung kaya ninyo, okay? So, no pressure at all. Now, these are how many questions? 15 questions lang po yan, mga kaibigan. Alright. Now, after that, you have the first part of the lesson. Ito na yung introduction as well as the activity behind it. Okay, so simulan na nga natin, my dear math learners. Alright. So, dito sa Let Us Study, we already learned last module about the conditional statements. Alright? Joining or formed by joining two statements, the P and Q, where the P is the hypothesis and the Q is the statement for conclusion. In this lesson, you will be able to determine the inverse, the converse, and the contrapositive of a conditional statement. So, ano yung, of course, when we say inverse, kabaliktaran, okay? So, converse naman, later on, I will tell you, okay? So, let us start. Alright, activity 1. So, identify the hypothesis and conclusion of the following statements. So, aalamin lang natin ano yung hypothesis, ano yung conclusion. So, napakadali lang nito, my dear math learners, because yung mga may if, yun yung mga hypothesis. Yung mga may then, yun yung mga conclusion. Okay, number 1. If we turn on the stove, then the water will boil. Okay, the hypothesis there is we turn on the stove. The conclusion, of course, is the water will boil. Okay, napakadali lang.
Easy, right?
Yes, easy lang talaga, my dear math learners. Number 2, if a population consists of 70% men, then 30% of the population must be women. Okay, so the hypothesis is a population consists of 70% men. Conclusion, 30% of the population must be women. Ganon lang kadali, my dear math learners. Okay, number 3. If it is a square, then their diagonals are perpendicular. Of course, for the hypothesis, it is a square. For the conclusion, their diagonals are perpendicular. So, my dear math learners, kapag nakalagay dito siya or nakastate siya sa if and then na format, napakadali lang alamin kung sino si hypothesis at sino si conclusion. Okay, so ganun lang kadali ang activity 1, my dear math learners. Okay, let's go to activity 2. Rewrite each statement in if and then form. Identify the hypothesis and conclusion in the if and then form. In the if and then statement form. Okay. So these are sentences. Gagawa tayo ng if and then format from these sentences. So, okay, let's try. Number 1. Susie eats pizza every Thursday. Okay, so if and then form. If Susie eats pizza, then it is Thursday. Ayan, ganyan lang kadali. So, of course, pag na-statement na natin ganun, alam nyo na doon kung sino si hypothesis, sino si conclusion. So, Susie eats pizza. So, conclusion is, it is Thursday. Alright, ganun lang kadali. Okay. Next, Rachel always completes her homework. Okay. So, if and then statement natin dyan. If you are Rachel, then you complete your homework. Oh, ganon. Pwede yun. So, hypothesis is, if you are Rachel, so, conclusion, you complete your homework. Okay. Napakadali lang, my dear math learners. Okay. How about number 3? Alex goes to school every weekday. Alright. So, if and then statement dito is, let's try. If Alex goes to school, or if Alex go to school, then it is a weekday. Ayan, pwede na yan. So, for that matter, kayo na, my dear math learners, ang mag-consider sa hypothesis and conclusion. So, pwede nyo yang ilagay sa ating ano tawag dyan? Comment box kung meron kayo. Alright. Next, we also have the, ang tawag dito? Saan dyan? Number 4, all students have a math class. Okay. So, if you are a student, then you have a math class. Oh, ganun na kadali. So, hypothesis and conclusion, napakadali alamin mula doon. Number 5, we have squares have right angles. If it is a square, then it has right angles.
Easy, right?
Easy lang talaga, my dear math learners. Ganun lang kadali. Alright. So, ito na nga ang mga statements natin for the conditional statements. Conditional statements, as what we all know last discussion sa module 4, are formed by joining two statements P and Q using the words if and then. And then the P statement is called the hypothesis and the Q statement is called the conclusion. Okay, so basically we have if P then Q. So that is the notation. Yung P tapos may arrow na Q. Alright. So, what are converse, inverse, and contrapositive? Okay, so for converse, when you make a converse from a conditional statement, the converse of a conditional statement is formed by switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, pagbabaliktarin mo, my dear math learners. So, when we say pagbabaliktarin, so if P then Q, ang conditional statement, pag mag-converse tayo, gagawin na itong if Q, then P. Okay? If Q, then P. Ganon. So, let's go to inverse naman. So, inverse naman ang kabaliktaran ng conditional statement. So, gagamit tayo dito ng mga negative words. Like, ano ba yung mga negative words? Words like not or an, ganon, mga prefix or, okay? So, mga hindi sa isang statement. So, the inverse of if P then Q is, ito yon. Oh, yan, parang similarity na na symbol, 'di ba? All right. So, ganyan. So, that is inverse of P then Q. Then inverse of Q, ganon. Okay. So, ano naman itong contrapositive? So, contrapositive naman ang tawag sa pagne-negate ng converse. Okay? So, si inverse at si contrapositive, pareho lang silang dalawa ng idea. However, si inverse ay nakanegate kay conditional statement, P, if P, then Q. Pero si contrapositive naman is the negation or yung pag-negative ng isang converse na statement. So, ano yun? Negative, anong tawag dyan? Negative Q, if negative Q, then negative P. Alright? Medyo
Easy
nakakalito. Yeah, easy lang. Pero try natin sa mga examples, my dear math learners. Okay. Na, ito, example. If Sally is hungry, then she eats a snack. Okay. Ito yung conditional statement. So, kung gagawin natin itong converse, babaliktarin natin si if at si then. Right? Okay. So, yung magiging if natin will be the Q. So, if Sally eats a snack, okay, then she is hungry. So, binaliktad lang. The same concept pa rin. Okay. How about inverse? So, kapag inverse naman, titingin tayo dito sa taas. Okay? Sa conditional statement. If Sally is not hungry, then she will not eat a snack. Okay, so kung hindi siya gutom, hindi din siya kakain, of course. Then sa contrapositive naman, tingin ka sa converse. So, if Sally eats a snack dito sa converse, 'di ba? So ngayon, kung igagawin natin siyang contrapositive, magiging if Sally does not eat a snack, then she is not hungry. Ganon lang kadali, my dear math learners.
Easy, right?
Yes, easy lang talaga. So now, let us go to example number 2. We have, if a shape is a triangle, then its angles add up to 180. Okay. So, converse niyan is babaliktarin mo lang. If a shape has angles that adds up to 180 degrees, then it is a triangle. Okay. So, the inverse of that will be focusing on the conditional statement. So, if a shape is not a triangle, then its angles does not add up to 180 degrees. So, for the contrapositive, based tayo sa converse, so if a shape does not have angles which add up to 180 degrees, then it is not a triangle. So, ganon lang po kadali, my dear math learners. So, ulit lang tayo. The inverse is the kabaliktaran ni conditional statement. Si converse naman ang pagbabaliktad ng hypothesis at ng conclusion. Tapos, si contrapositive naman ay ang kabaliktaran ni converse. Okay? When we say kabaliktaran, yung negation niya, yung paggamit ng not. Alright. Okay. So, I hope that is clear, my dear math learners. Okay. So, we have here. Take a look at this. Okay. If the object is a square, then Q is, then it is a quadrilateral. So these are the conditional statement. If the object is a square, then it is a quadrilateral. Okay. So what happened to P and Q in the converse? Okay. So kung i-converse natin ito, this will become if the object is a quadrilateral, then it is a square. Pero in this matter, hindi siya yung context niya or yung meaning niya, hindi siya always acceptable. Okay? Pero based on the converse, that is the now. So, compare the inverse and the original statement. So kung inverse naman ang pag-uusapan, ito lang yun siya, gagawa lang tayo ng hindi. Okay. So, if the object is not a square, then it is not a quadrilateral. So, as we know, hindi din yun somehow tama, pero hindi parate. Okay? Because marami kasing klase ng quadrilateral. You will know that when you go in or when you turn into grade 9. Okay? Kasi may geometry lesson doon about quadrilaterals. Okay. What did you do with P? What did you do with Q? Okay, so mga ganun. Observe the changes in the contrapositive. Summarize your observation. So, in the contrapositive naman, maggagawa lang tayo ng not. So, based on our inverse. So, that could be, if it is not a quadrilateral, tama nga. If it is not a quadrilateral, then it is not a square. Then the object is not a square. If the object is not a quadrilateral, then the object is not a square. Alright, but basically, the context of that is not always true. Alright, let's take another statement. An even number is divisible by 2. Tama naman. Okay, if it is an even number, then it is divisible by 2. Correct. Conversely, kung gagawa tayo ng converse, if it is divisible by 2, then it is an even number. Correct. Tama yun. Inverse natin is from the if and then statement. If it is not an even number, then it is not divisible by 2. So, gumamit lang tayo ng not from the first statement. And for the contrapositive, we just use not for the converse. So, if it is not divisible by 2, then it is not an even number. Okay. So, for the statement, if P, then Q. For the converse, if Q, then P. For in the inverse, if not P, then not Q. For the contrapositive, if not Q, then not P. So, ganun lang kadali, my dear math learners. So, I'm sure kayang-kaya nyo nang gawin itong activity 3. Today is Tuesday, the next day is Wednesday, of course. Okay. So, paano ba natin kukunin yan? O, sige, if and then tayo, para at least meron kayong idea. If today is Tuesday, then the next day is Wednesday. Alright, so ganon. So kayo nang kumuha sa converse, kayo kumuha ng inverse and contrapositive. You can put that in our chat box or in the comment section below para at least ma-check din natin. Alright, next we have here the truth table, okay, of if P then Q. So P, Q, if P then Q. Okay, so if P is true and the Q is true, then that is true. If the P is true and the F is false, then the whole statement is false. If the P is both false, regardless whether the Q is true or false, then the whole scenario will be true. Okay. So at least nakuha nyo ng idea dito, okay? Now, let's go to activity 4. Ito, basis lang ito, my dear math learners. That is the truth table. Okay, activity 4. Read and analyze the statements below. Tell whether each statement is true or false. Okay. So, true or false lang tayo, my dear math learners. So, if it rains, then the ground is wet. Yes, that's correct. Okay. If the ground is wet, then it rained. If the ground is wet, then it rained. Hindi parate. Okay, hindi always. So, false yun. If it does not rain, then the ground is not wet. Correct. Because this is just a inverse of this number 1. So, that is true. It could be true, di ba? If it does not rain, then the ground is not wet. If it does not rain, hindi. Based on the context pala, pwede din namang false yun. Kasi, pwede mang mababasa si ground kahit hindi umulan. Tama? Maraming mga factors to consider. Okay. So, medyo tricky siya, my dear math learners, right? Okay. So, how about this number 4? If the ground is not wet, then it did not rain. So, pwede din natin sabihin yun. Okay. Kung yung ground talaga natin ay, kunwari, for example, we consider the mga palayan ng mga magsasaka. Diba? Kung nagkaka-El Nino. So, klarong-klaro talagang hindi umulan doon. Okay? So, that is considered to be a true statement. Alright! So, ganun lang kadali, my dear math
Easy,
learner.
right?
Okay, so, you just try to have a higher or parang practice na lang talaga, my dear math learners, para mas humasa pa yung analysis ninyo or yung logical thinking ninyo. Alright! Now, let's go to this one. A conditional statement and its contrapositive are either both true or both false. The original conditional statement and its contrapositive will always have the same meaning. Yeah, that is correct. Kung kabaliktaran yun siya. Pero, in terms of the context, hindi naman practical. Katulad kanina, di ba, sa square at saka quadrilateral. Binaliktad natin, kinuha natin converse, pero hindi naman parating tama. Anyway, so we have here, similarly, the converse and the inverse of the conditional statement are either both true or false. The converse and inverse of a conditional statement will always have the same meaning. Alright. When the two statements are both true or both false, they are called equivalent statements. Okay, so example, we have here, original statement, whenever I do yoga, I feel calm. Okay, diagram, sorry, yoga and calm. Alright. So in other words, yoga is sufficient to trigger guaranteed calm. Let's assume the original statement to be true. Okay, pwede. Now, consider this variation. If I'm feeling calm, then I'm doing yoga. Calm to yoga. Would it suffice? Hindi, di ba? Kasi hindi mo naman kailangang mag-yoga para maging calm. Somehow, or hindi ka naman nag-yoga dahil naging calm ka. Ayun, yun pa, yung ano ka, or kalmado ka, di ba? So, nag-yoga ka para kumalma. Pero, hindi ka naging kalma dahil nag-yoga ka. So, hindi siya, it does not follow from the original statement. Ganun yun. Here's another version. If I'm not doing yoga, then I'm not feeling calm. Okay, so not yoga, not calm. So, as you can see, hindi naman din tama. Kung hindi ka nag-yoga, hindi ka din kalmado. Marami namang way para maging relax ka, di ba? So, it does not apply to the context. So, last, if I'm not feeling calm, then I'm not doing yoga. So, if you're not calm, you're not doing yoga, so most likely, pwede din. Pwede ito. Bakit? It's because, kung hindi ka kalmado, tapos hindi ka nag-yoga, maaring tama din naman. Kung yung yoga yung way para maging kalmado ka. So, that could be another way. Okay? So, somehow, it is medyo tricky masyado, but you need to get the equivalent idea of this one para at least makuha mo talaga kung ang context is always applicable or not. Okay. So, why? If doing yoga is sufficient to making calm, as the original asserts, if I'm not calm, I couldn't possibly be doing yoga. Tama din naman. Because every time I do yoga, I feel calm. Alright. So, these are the explanation or the justification about the logic. Alright. So, we have here another example. Example number 2. Original statement ito, where whenever there's a puppy in my house, I feel happy. So, puppy in my house, happy. Okay. So, that could be true. Let's assume that is true. So, if we reverse it, if I'm happy, then there's a puppy in my house. Hindi naman yun. Bakit? Having a puppy in the house could be one thing that you are happy, but we cannot say na yung happiness mo ay nakadepende lang sa puppy in the house. There are a lot of ways. Tama. Okay, so it's not equivalent. Okay. So another is where is that? The converse, if we reverse it. Okay, this version is sometimes called the converse. Okay. So in this case, if I'm happy, you don't know why. It could be because of a puppy, but it could also be because of something else. Or yun nga sabi ko. Another way of putting it is the converse does not follow logically. It is not a supportable deduction. Okay? So hindi siya basis. So if A then B is not logically equivalent to B then A, if we make both things negative, will the new statement be logically equivalent to the original statement? Okay, let's try. If there isn't a puppy in the house, then I'm not happy. No puppy, not happy. No, that's wrong. Why? Because that is not necessarily true. Kung wala talagang papi, hindi ka nasasaya. Di ba? Okay. Alright, so let's continue. Alright. Grabing tawa doon. Let's continue this one. How about if we get the contrapositive? Okay, saan ba ang contrapositive dito? So, if I'm not happy, then you know for sure that there isn't a puppy in the house. Okay, pwede yun. Yeah. Not happy, no puppy. Oh, yan. Very good. Pwede yan siya. Because, of course, if you're not happy, then there is no way to have a puppy in the house. Okay, pwede yun. So, logically, if A, then B is logically equivalent to not B, then not A. Okay? So, technically speaking, in terms of the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive, the if and then statement and the contrapositive are logically correct. Okay? So, this version is sometimes called the contrapositive of the original conditional statement. Okay? So, that's it. There are the two and the only two definitive relationships that we can be sure of. You don't know anything if I simply tell you that I feel happy. Maybe I'm happy because I have an extra delicious donut. Or maybe I'm happy because someone got me flowers. Grabe. Okay, so ganun, my dear math learners. Okay, let's continue and go to activity 5. So we have here, fill up the statement. If two angles are congruent, then they have the same measure. Okay, so converse niyan, if the two angles have the same measures, then they are congruent. Ayun, yun ang converse niya. Inverse naman is, if two angles are not congruent, then they are not the same, then they have no the same measure. Okay, ganon. Pwede yun ang inverse. Contrapositive naman is, if two angles have no same measurement, then no two angles are congruent. Alright. So, pwedeng ganon. So, ito letter B, if you don't brush your teeth, then your breath will smell bad. I'm sure kayang-kaya na yan, my dear math learner. Same goes to number 2. Okay, so let's go to activity 6. We have here conditional statement. If the measurement of angle A is 78, then the angle A is acute. True or false? That's true. If angle A is acute, then the measurement of A is 78. That is false. Bakit? Maraming klase ng acute from 1 degree up to the 89th degree of an angle, that is acute. Hindi lang 78 degrees. If the measurement of angle A is not 78 degrees, then it is not acute. Wrong din ito. Bakit? Kunwari, what if 50 degrees? Acute pa rin yun. Okay. So, ito naman. If an angle is not acute, then the measurement of angle A is not 78 degrees. Pwede. Tama yun. Bakit? Because kung ang angle A is not acute, therefore, it takes na yung measurement ng angle is from 1 up to 89, hindi magiging measurement ng angle A yun. So, it is true. So, true, false, false, true. Okay. Which of the following statements are equivalent? So, alam nyo na, remember that the equivalent are the if and then statements and the contrapositive. Okay, so I hope you can answer this 1, 2, and 3. Next, we go to activity 8. Give the equivalent statement. If you are a Filipino, then you have black hair. Wow. Kunin natin ang contrapositive nito. If you don't have a black hair, then you are not a Filipino. Yan. Okay, so technically speaking, in order to get the equivalent statement of this one, you get the contrapositive of this one. Okay, my dear math learners, ulitin ko. Para masagot nyo ito, kunin nyo lang ang anong tawag dyan? Contrapositive ng activity 8. Okay. Now, we have here, let us practice more. Statement or state the conditions, state the conditional, converse, inverse, and the contrapositive of the following statements. All supplementary angles form a linear pair. Okay? Tama ba? Complementary. Oh yeah, that's correct. So, conditional statement. So, gagawa ka dito ng if and then statement. Okay? So, if all angles are supplementary, if angles are supplementary, then it forms a linear pair. Ganon. Okay, so that will be your conditional statement. Of course, kayo nang gumawa ng converse, inverse, at contrapositive. Okay. A rectangle has 4 right angles. Okay. If it is a rectangle, then it has 4 right angles. Alright, yun ang conditional nun. Then, kayo nang kumuha ng converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Okay. Activity 10. We have give the equivalent statements and determine the truth value. Okay. So, example, if a triangle is obtuse, then it has exactly one obtuse angle. So, equivalent statement, if a triangle has not had exactly one obtuse angle, then it is not obtuse. Okay. So, as you can see, my dear math learners, dito sa example, this is known as the conditional statement, and then kinuha niya ang contrapositive statement. Binaliktad niya yung P and Q, tapos ninegate niya. Okay. So, for you to have the equivalent statement of number 1, 2, and 3, you need to get the contrapositive statement of the given conditional statement. So, example here, if 2 angles are complementary, then they are acute. Okay. Excuse me. So, if we get the equivalent statement of this one, I will start from here. Okay. And I will negate this one. If 2 angles are acute, then if 2 angles are not acute, yun pala. If 2 angles are not acute, then they are not complementary. Easy, right? Easy lang talaga, my dear math learners. Okay. So, how about this one? Ay, ito na. Let us remember na tayo. So, let us remember. Technically, this is the generalization or the conclusion of the module itself. Okay. So, converse is the if and then statements. Ay, sorry. The conditional is the if and then. The converse is the negation, is the kabaliktaran ng conditional. So, si P and Q, ginawang Q, then P. Okay. Si inverse naman, ang negation ng conditional. Si contrapositive, ang negation ng converse. Okay. So, in terms of equivalent fractions, only the conditional statement and the contrapositive statements are equivalent statements. Okay. So, after that, you have now your let us assess, meaning this is the time na sasagot kayo ng masinsinan, yung best talaga ninyo para makuha ang tamang sagot. So, ABCD pa rin ito. So, hopefully, after the discussion, marami na kayong natutunan about this topic. Okay, so these are 15 questions pa rin, and make sure na tama yung mga sagot nyo dito. Okay, my dear math learners. And after that, after the post-test, you have the let us enhance. So, this is the performance task. So, you follow the instruction and there the rubrics. Okay? Then, after that, you have your reflection. So, in this lesson, I have understood that. Okay, so ano yung mga natutunan mo sa lesson na ito? So, my dear math learners, you just try to do what you can para makuha nyo or sabihin nyo kung ang totoo dito. Okay? So, may nahirapan ba kayo? Medyo nahilito ba kayo sa mga ganyan-ganyan? Okay? So, I hope, my dear math learners, marami kayong natutunan sa discussion na ito. And if ever marami pang mga topics na gusto nyong itackle natin, do not hesitate to put your inquiries in our comment section below. This is still your free access YouTube edu creator, Math Teacher Ash. And always remember, it is fun to learn mathematics if we are together learning. If you are new to the channel, please click the subscribe button. Share this video to all your friends, classmates, and schoolmates because of course, we wanted to help more students para mas gumaling pa sila sa mathematics. Take care, God bless, and keep safe always.
I will take a little trip over yonder, so I can take a look around at what you've seen. I can see